Good afternoon, everybody. This is Jennifer Schaus coming to you live from Washington, D.C., and welcome to our webinar Wednesdays, where we are delivering a complimentary webinar every Wednesday in 2018. Today we have Mark Amadeo with us, who's going to be talking about the All Small Mentor-PROTÉGÉ program. As I mentioned, our webinars are every Wednesday and they are complimentary. They're all recorded. You can grab the download if you're unable to stay on for the duration of the webinar at our website, which is listed there, and go to the webinar tab. All of the saved webinars are segmented by topic. Our presenters are various experts on government contracting. It includes consultants, accountants, attorneys, and other individuals who have a special knowledge of government contracting. Forgot to mention, you can also grab our webinars on our YouTube channel. If you do have questions, please send them directly to Mark. His contact information will be posted at the end of the webinar here. And thanks everybody for participating. A quick blurb about us. We're based in downtown DC and provide various professional services for government contractors all over the world. Our services range from market analysis reports, 8A certification, GSA schedules, and additional services that are listed there on the slide. More about us can be found on our website. A little bit about Mark can be found on this slide, and he's also has a YouTube channel, I believe, and a podcast. You can find that on his website, which would be on the AmadeoLawFirm.com website. Mark, thanks so much for joining us today and sharing your knowledge, as you've done with us many times in 2017 and previous years, and I will hand the floor over to you. So thanks for joining us today.
Absolutely. Thanks, Jennifer. And thanks, everyone, for listening in. So today we're going to talk briefly about the SBA's All Small Mentor-PROTÉGÉ program. So in July 2016, the SBA issued a final rule that implemented what's commonly called the All Small Mentor-PROTÉGÉ program. And that program was modeled after the SBA's already existing Mentor-PROTÉGÉ program. So under these two Mentor-PROTÉGÉ programs, approved mentors provide business development assistance to their protégés. And under the programs, the Mentor-PROTÉGÉ teams are able to bid on and be awarded small business contracts. Now, the goal of the Mentor-PROTÉGÉ program is to enhance the ability of the protégé firm to succeed and ultimately to compete on its own for government contracts. So this business development assistance from the mentors can take many forms. It can include sharing experience and expertise and best practices over contracting and technical or strategic or management issues. But the business development assistance can also include financial assistance in the form of equity ownership and loans. And lastly, I think perhaps the most valuable business development assistance that a protégé can get comes from the experience that a protégé gains when it works side by side under a government contract with a more experienced contractor. Next slide, please. So it's this last benefit, the contracting aspect of the mentor and protégé relationship, that we're going to spend most of our time talking about today. So under the All Small Mentor-PROTÉGÉ program, a small business that is not in the SBA's 8A program can team up with an approved mentor to collectively act as a prime contractor on a small business contract. Now, the small business contract can be a contract that's set aside for a woman-owned small business, a HUB's-owned business, or a service-disabled veteran-owned small business, as long as the protégé qualifies as a woman-owned small business or HUB's-owned business or service-disabled veteran-owned small business. Now, mentors can and often are large businesses. So the Mentor-PROTÉGÉ program opens up a unique and rare opportunity for large business, and that opportunity is the opportunity to compete for and be awarded a small business prime contract. And this opportunity only exists under the SBA's 8A and All Small Mentor-PROTÉGÉ program. So let's talk for a minute about the mechanics and why this is so rare. Now, the SBA's rules anticipate that when mentors and proteges team up for a contract, they will arrange themselves as a joint venture. Now, we've done a whole separate webinar on joint ventures, and my firm has published a white paper on joint ventures. So if you're interested in getting more information about webinars, you can about joint ventures, you can go to my website, you can go to Jennifer's website and get that webinar on joint ventures. But briefly, when two or more companies team up to work together under a government contract as a joint venture, the general rule under the SBA's regulation is that the two companies will be deemed affiliated. Now, under the SBA's affiliation rules, whenever a contractor is considered to be affiliated with any other company, the business sizes of the contractor and any affiliated companies are combined or added together to determine if the contractor is a small business for purposes of a small business set-aside contract. So under this general SBA affiliation rule that applies to joint ventures, if just one joint venture partner is a large business, the entire joint venture will be considered a large business and therefore ineligible for a small business set-aside contract. But there's an exception to the joint venture affiliation rule for joint ventures between mentors and proteges under the All Small Mentor-Protege program. So it's this exception to affiliation that allows a large business to participate as a prime under a small business contract. Next slide, please. So let's talk briefly about the application process. It's very similar to the 8A Mentor-Protege program application process. The mentor and protege first have to establish a mentor-protege relationship, and they do this by entering into a mentor-protege agreement. And they have to do this early on before they submit their mentor-protege application with the SBA. The applicants also must register in the System for Award Management, or SAM, and they also have to complete an online training module. And then once they're done with all that, they then have to complete an application on the SBA's website at www.certified.sba.gov. Next slide, please. So the mentor-protege agreement that we just mentioned has to meet certain requirements under the SBA's rules. And many of them are up there on the slide, so we'll just touch on a few now. The mentor-protege agreement has to be in writing. It also has to indicate how the assistance that's provided by the mentor will help the protege in meeting its business goals. The mentor-protege agreement also has to be approved by the SBA before the mentor-protege team submits a bid in order for the joint venture affiliation exception that we just talked about, in order for that to apply to an awarded contract. So if a mentor and protege have submitted a mentor-protege agreement to the SBA, and while they're waiting for approval, a solicitation deadline comes up, well, if they submit an offer before they get approval of the mentor-protege agreement, they're not going to be eligible for the exception to affiliation if ultimately they're awarded the contract. So if the mentor is a large business, or the mentor and protege collectively exceed the small business size standard for the contract, they're going to be out of luck. And then, although the initial term of the mentor-protege agreement can only be 3 years, this is subject to one extension for 3 more years. Next slide, please. Now, I mentioned earlier that the SBA rules anticipate that mentors and proteges will contract as a joint venture. So they have to enter into a joint venture agreement. And the SBA regulation on the slide that's up there lists 12 requirements that all mentor-protege joint venture agreements have to meet. So for example, one requirement is that the joint venture agreement must designate the small business as the managing partner of the joint venture. Another requirement is that it must state that the small business must own at least 51% of the joint venture. And then another requirement is that the joint venture agreement must identify the responsibilities of the protege and the mentor over things like the negotiation of the contract, the source of labor, and contract performance. So you want to be familiar with those requirements when you're putting together your joint venture agreement. In addition to the 12 requirements on the agreement, the rules also say that the joint venture must meet performance of work requirements. And the performance of work requirements require that the protege perform at least 40% of the work that's done by the joint venture. So contractors may want to memorialize this requirement in their joint venture agreement. Now, the joint venture agreement itself does not have to be approved by the SBA, but before the joint venture does any work under the contract, the protege must submit a certification that the joint venture meets the 12 requirements that we referred to earlier, and also that the parties will comply with the joint venture agreement and with the performance of work requirements. Next slide. Thank you. So let's talk for a minute about mentors. Now, there are several requirements for mentors that I've put up there on the slide. So one requirement is that the mentor must be a for-profit business. Now, this was different from the 8A mentor-protege program that was in place before the July 2016 rule changes, but the 2016 rule changes now also require 8A mentors to be for-profit as well. And again, there's no limit on the business size of the mentor. And there's also an expectation that the mentor will only mentor one protege, unless the mentor can demonstrate that an additional mentor-protege relationship won't adversely affect an existing mentor-protege relationship. A protege itself can be a mentor, and a mentor can own up to 40% of the protege firm. Next slide, please. Now, as for proteges, they also have to meet requirements, and we'll touch on a few. A protege has to be small under its primary NAICS code or under a secondary NAICS code that it's seeking business development assistance under. A protege can self-certify that it's a small business, and this is a significant difference from the 8A mentor-protege program, which requires the protege to have gone through the 8A certification process. Now, as we know, that can take some time, so the all-small mentor-protege program cuts out one layer of SBA approval. There's also a general expectation that under the all-small program, the protege will only have one mentor, but it can have a second mentor for a separate secondary line of business if the first mentor lacks expertise in that business and there's no conflict with the first mentor-protege relationship. And the last point we'll make here is that an 8A protege in the 8A mentor-protege program that graduates out of the 8A program can transfer its mentor-protege relationship to the all-small program without having to reapply or receive approval from the SBA. And this is presumably because the mentor-protege relationship was already approved under the 8A program. Next slide, please. So a few concluding thoughts here. Now, as of this month, January 2018, according to the SBA's website, there are about 383 active mentor-protege agreements. And the all-small mentor-protege program was unveiled at the same time that the SBA made its revisions to the joint venture rules. And all of these changes were intended, at least in part, to encourage more joint ventures and mentor-protege collaborations. So some of the criticism under the 8A mentor-protege program was that there were not enough 8A contracts for larger, more experienced businesses to invest their time and effort into the program. So under the All Small program, the universe of contracts that mentor-protege teams can target, has expanded fairly significantly, not just 8A contracts, but really any small business contract. And another complaint under the 8A program by some of the bigger companies was that the 60% ceiling for work performed by the mentor, well, that's just not incentive enough for a large business to invest its time and resources when it might otherwise be targeting a large business contract. And I think the SBA, in clarifying that small business proteges themselves can also be mentors, is encouraging small businesses to think creatively when they explore the teaming opportunities. In other words, the best opportunities for mentor-protege collaborations may not just be with the larger primes. So a good potential mentor may be a company that has just outgrown its small business size standard, or it may be a company that just graduated from the 8A program, or it may even be a mature, experienced small business. So in closing, I would encourage companies, if they're considering this, to think more broadly about who can act as potential mentors. Well, that's all I have for my presentation. Thanks again, Jennifer, and I want to thank everyone for listening. And if you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me.
Mark, thanks so much for a great presentation. It really seems like this opens up some doors for businesses in the government contracting sector. If anybody has more specific questions about the Mentor-Protege program, please contact Mark directly. His contact information is there on the slide. Next week, we are going to be talking about the NDAA, National Defense Authorization Act, with Mary Beth Bosco from Holland and Knight. The full schedule of all of our webinars can be found on our website under the webinar section, and all of the recordings are there as well. Those are segmented by topic. If you have questions about government contracting in general or any of our services, please contact us at the phone number and the website listed there. Thanks again, everybody, and thanks again, Mark.
Thank you.